not about coronavirus. This is the time to now address what's really going on inside. So your anxiety, the fact that you can't have a healthy relationship, the fact that you have so much resistance getting up in the morning to go and do things that are creative, that resistance, that feeling of unworthiness, that shame, the fact that you care so much about what other people think of you. These are all the symptoms of unresolved intergenerational trauma, and we never learn tools in how to deal with those.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. And don't forget to subscribe. If you want to see and hear more episodes that elevate your life, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you would, just give the podcast a quick rating in iTunes. All right, I am so excited for you to hear this episode. This was such a great conversation. You are going to be hearing from Dr. Nima Rahmany. He's a chiropractor turned what he calls edutainer. He is on a mission to help people dissolve the root cause of stress. He left his chiropractic practice to start teaching people. He has been teaching people who are stuck in toxic relationships, career limbo, and who are dealing with emotional trauma. Today, we talk a lot about that trauma, how it is the root cause of stress, how to start walking out of that, and how to become trigger proof. You're going to also find out how you can stop the generational trauma and make a difference for your own children. Let's get to it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
It's good to be here.
I love what you do. I think it's so incredible how you're changing people's lives. So I want to go to the part of your story where you're a chiropractor and you're seeing people come in and you're seeing stress manifest in the physical body. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, everybody's coming in with stress-related problems to see me, and some get better and some don't. And I remember this one woman who came in, extreme amount of neck pain, and she was just like this. And you could see she wasn't, when somebody walks by you and you're like, whoa, what's gotten into them? Well, she was a patient of mine. I just remember her. After her third session, we didn't get much leeway with her neck pain. And then I told her something. I said, you know what? I'm doing a little workshop on Saturday called Life Skills for a Stressful World, because I just started noticing that a lot of these problems are life stress related. And if we can kind of go upstream, we get better results in here. Anyway, I never saw her again. She wanted nothing to do with any of that. 8 years later, I had just gotten so frustrated with the whole concept that I decided to leave my practice and just start teaching and doing online programs. And I just gave myself permission to go upstream. And I created a methodology which heals our primary core attachment wounds that are responsible for every other kind of breakdown that happens in our lives. I was like, hey, well, crap, I gotta, might as well just go straight to the root of it. And I'm doing a talk in downtown Vancouver, and she attended because her stepson was the coordinator of this whole event. So she walks up to me, she goes, do you remember me? And I'm like, no. She goes, I was your patient 8 years ago. And I was like, oh, okay. She goes, I only came to see you 3 times. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, crap, I heard her. Like, I did an adjustment on her. She's one of those people that are walking around going, I went and saw a chiropractor. He adjusted me. Now I swear that I'll never go see them again. She goes, no, after the third session, you were trying to get into my head and I wanted no part of it. And now, after listening to you speak, I realize I was running away from my emotional pain and I didn't want to deal with it. And I'm ready now. And it turns out she was going through a divorce, and the stress of it, the guilt, the shame, the whatever emotions going around were all manifesting in the physical body. And after my third session with her, I said, I got to be honest, I could just do this every day for the next year, and that would be, great for my pocketbook, but you're not, so I saw these patterns, Danielle, again and again and again, and I decided that I'm gonna go against that voice that says, "Why would anyone listen? I'm just a chiropractor." Like, you're out of your scope of practice. You're stay in your lane. You are a quack. You're pseudoscientific. I was battling those voices for about 3 years until I finally said, whatever you have to say that says that you think that me being a chiropractor for 20 years makes me not qualified to talk about the real root cause of healing, be my guest, go ahead. I'm going to teach people how to heal the root cause of the root cause, which is really when it all comes down to it is, to make a very long story short, if we could go up, it is it is the duty, if you want to heal, to be the cause of breaking the cycle of intergenerational trauma in your family dynamic.
Mm.
Like, this is why you got sick. This is why you got a divorce. This is why you're going through the crisis right now, is because the universe is calling on you to be the one to break the cycle of intergenerational trauma that didn't even start with you. And any other conversation that I have with people in the health, kind of on a health journey, if I don't address that, then I'm completely not getting to the root cause. So now I create, you know, programs and masterminds for people who are just interested in that, so that they can deepen the intimacy in their relationships, because it translates to everything. Not only like you feel safer in your body, you're not as anxious, you don't do as many of your addictive compulsive behaviors, drinking, picking at your skin, pulling your hair, anxiety, drugs, addictions, all of those things, like within your personal self, which is the manifestation of that unresolved intergenerational trauma. But then it spreads into your relationships, and it prevents you from even being able to tell the truth to your partner and
Mhm.
having an intimate relationship. And you start to attract the same type of partner. You get into these narcissistic codependent cycles where you just become the pleaser, or you become
Mm.
extremely needy, where you're either the pleaser or you're the tyrant. And you play both of these roles, and you go into this drama triangle, and you get to one toxic relationship after another, and then you have kids, and then you pass it down to them, and then they grow up with the same disorders. And it's like any other conversation, except, all right, so let's not talk about symptoms anymore, because they're all a subset of unresolved intergenerational trauma, and that's the only conversation I'm willing to have now.
Life is stressful. Like, we're living in a pandemic. We have no control over these different kinds of things. How does that intergenerational trauma impact the regular, typical stress of life?
Yeah, well, good question. Well, here's the thing. The whole coronavirus pandemic is stressful, right? We are now going into the unknown, but all year you've seen people reacting and responding to what's going on around them. And the truth of the matter is, none of it is really about coronavirus. It's all about what's already stuck in your body from 9/11, from the Great Depression, from slavery, like from let me give you an example. How does it affect, like, this whole stuff with coronavirus, and then George Floyd, and then the riots? It wasn't about 2020. This was about intergenerational trauma of slavery,
Mm.
slave owner. Like, this is like generations, like all these riots and uprisings are intergenerational trauma. It all starts from that. There's nothing that isn't. The fact that you're sitting here and coronavirus starts hitting and things going in lockdown, you already had challenges. We already had challenges in our relationships. We already didn't feel safe in our body. We already were holding on to grief that's unresolved from a breakup or a lost loved one, or, like the divorce that happened with, your parents when you were 8 years old, and all of a sudden you were thrown into a situation where you didn't have any control and you were wondering what's next. Well, that's really what's going on in the coronavirus pandemic. It's
Mm.
those unresolved things right in your face. And now we're going to blame Trump or Biden or China or this, and we're just trying to make everybody responsible to give us that safety and security that was lost in that younger time, when it all began, I created a Facebook group called Trigger Proof during the coronavirus, because I saw everybody going crazy. And I was just basically saying, hey, everyone, this is not about coronavirus. This is the time to now address what's really going on inside. So your anxiety, the fact that you can't have a healthy relationship, the fact that you have so much resistance getting up in the morning to go and do things that are creative, that resistance, that feeling of unworthiness, that shame, the fact that you care so much about what other people think of you. These are all the symptoms of unresolved intergenerational trauma, and we never learned tools in how to deal with those. So I basically became obsessed with first cleaning up my own act, making sure that I cleaned up my own house, as Jordan Peterson says, first, which was the fact that I wasn't able to have a healthy relationship. I would just go from one kind of toxic, codependent, narcissistic cycle after another. The divorce didn't wake me up. 4 or 5 relationships afterwards didn't wake me up. And finally, I had a huge meltdown that finally woke me up. I hit a pause in trying to be relevant and trying to help other people, and just went inside and dealt with the root cause. I moved back in with my parents. I knew this was an issue with my primary attachment caregivers. So I did the unthinkable. At the age of 43, I moved back in with my parents and didn't do anything else except work on healing that relationship. And it wasn't easy because they're Persian, classic kind of narcissistic parent where uh, children are to be seen, not heard.
Mhm.
And I worked on becoming the parent to myself and releasing the expectation of them to do it for me.
Oh.
And it magically transformed my entire life. My relationship with them changed. I was then able to meet a really healthy, secure relationship who wasn't kind of broken, so that I can fix her by, being
Mhm.
important and acting out on my unconscious wounds. And now I have a family and a baby, and everything I do, every conversation I have points to the direction of stopping this cycle that didn't start with you, but it
Mhm.
can end with you if you're willing to take responsibility.
Mhm. I am now the emoji with the brain like popping out of the head. This is amazing. So, someone who has addressed this, someone who has gone to the root cause of this, something that didn't start with them, probably didn't start with their parents or even their grandparents. How how are they handling a stressful situation? When the pandemic comes up, how is it different for them?
How is it different from somebody who isn't? Well, it's different because they have extreme amount of anxiety. Sleep is not good for people who haven't addressed their attachment wounds. Sleep is not good. The main thing, here's the main thing that you'll see, Danielle, and I can feel it whenever I talk to somebody. It's so weird. After I've done this, I can just sit in a room with you and I can tell if you've been embodied or not. It's so weird.
Mm.
The ones who haven't are consistently looking outside of, this is the one key, are constantly looking outside of them for safety, for resource, for validation. And the ones who have aren't looking outside. They already have a knowing within and are in a completely different shift, are the creators, are okay, how can I help? So the main determining factor, whether or not you win or you lose throughout this entire coronavirus pandemic, is how regulated your nervous system is. Because
Mm.
if it is, then you look and all you see is opportunity. If it's not, all you see is someone come and save me. We
Mhm.
are in a perpetual, the ones who haven't are in a perpetual victim state, childlike, um, and I'm not saying this as a derogatory. I'm just saying this is just the way that it is. The sense, the feel, the vibe, and you know this when you meet somebody. Um, they're constantly in this perpetual state of victimhood. Their relationship with life is that they're a victim to life itself. We all know somebody like this, and if you can be honest, there's many times when you get triggered, we go straight there. That's the thing. The main key factor in this is when a person hasn't done their inner work, they become easily triggered. And when they get triggered, they become a different person. They have no ability to regulate or see themselves. They become possessed by the passenger, and they run away, they hide, they check out, they dissociate, they leave their bodies, they sedate, they numb, because it's so unsafe in your body and to be in your feelings. So the training of breaking that cycle is the heroic work of returning back to a body of a younger version of yourself that left its body just to be safe, just
Mm.
as a adaptive function, as a protective function, to be able to make it through, because the amount of internal chemical reaction to what's going on around them was so too much for the body to handle, that they actually just checked out and left. So that's dissociation. And so it's a lot of work to get back into your body when you have been conditioned to leave, and that's
Mhm.
the work. That's how you break the cycle.
So how do we do that? That's a big job to to kind of correct that nervous system issue that you created since being a little child.
It is that which you didn't even
You didn't
create.
yeah, yeah.
You didn't even create it. It was
Mhm.
like, let me give you an example. This is a really great example. I was doing an interview with somebody, and the guy, just after I just said this little story, he just paused and he was like, oh, like he uh, kind of fell back in tears when he realized the magnitude of how big this is. So imagine you have a 3-year-old daughter, and all of a sudden she has her, cup of juice or whatever, and then she spills it on the floor. And all of a sudden, you as a parent, you react and you turn to her and you say, "Why did you do that?" And all of a sudden, she doesn't know like, that's a trauma to a little child. The amount of sensations and chemical cocktail that gets released in her nervous system, she doesn't know what to do with. And all of a sudden she feels that, and then sees that reaction from mom or dad, and the story that she makes up in her body. Guess what the story that she makes up, Danielle?
What? I don't know. She's clumsy or she can't do things right or
I'm
something like that.
bad.
Oh,
I'm
I'm bad.
clumsy.
Okay.
I'm bad, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so when I said that to him, he turns and goes, "Oh my gosh, I did that to my daughter."
Mm.
I said, "Okay, perfect. You wanna see where this comes from?" Perfect. So I asked him this. I said, "Jason, when you saw your daughter spill the juice, immediately you got activated, you got triggered. What was the story? If you could just go and just pause and just take a space there, what was the story that you made up when she um, spilt the juice?" And he was like, "Hmm, I guess I made it mean that I'm a bad parent. I'm bad."
Wow.
And then I
Wow.
said, "Where do you think that came from?" And then he's like, "Oh my God, from my dad." And then I said, "Do you see how big this is? You literally unknowingly got it passed down to you." So how do you do that? I call it becoming trigger proof.
Mhm.
Okay. How do we break the cycle of intergenerational trauma? Well, the cycle of intergenerational trauma expresses itself in the moment between stimulus and response. Okay, I got to write that down. the, the expression of intergenerational trauma happens in between the moment between stimulus and response,
Okay.
trigger and reaction. And Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, you read that book. He said,
Mhm.
in between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space lies uh, our power to choose, and in that choice is our freedom.
Wow.
So what that means is, it's the training that's required to take you from reaction, and from trigger to reaction, and stretching that gap so that you're no longer run by those old stories. It's now you that's in charge. Because if you don't become trigger proof, I'm not saying trigger less, I mean
There will still be
responsible.
triggers. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
responsible. The longer that we can stretch that gap, the more we are able to choose our adventure. If we don't, then the unconscious runs the show, and we are destined to live in the perpetual effects of intergenerational trauma. Does that make sense? The
Mm-hmm.
question of, is this fate or is it free will? Well, Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you'll call it fate. In other words, the matrix is basically, it's running you until the moment where you can wake up and use the trigger as a opportunity to go inside and break down that cycle
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
repetitively. So I take my clients through the process, first of nervous system regulation. Secondly, you got to clear all of your past resentments. You got to process them, face them, feel them, embrace them, and actually work through them. I get them all to write a list of all their resentments and regrets. Okay, because those are running you. You know, you don't want to face, oh, it's in the past. No, no, no. We got to take a look at that. We got to unpack them. And we got to really look at what you perceive to be a resentment, what you perceive to be a regret. And we got to completely change that story, not just cognitively, but also in the body. And the third step is this little inner critic, dark passenger. I call the dark passenger, your shadow. It is important to learn how to dance with your shadow rather than keep running from your shadow. The ugly parts of you that you don't really want anybody to know about, you're ashamed of, you go to great lengths to try to avoid, people thinking that you're a failure, that you're, I go to great lengths to make people think that I'm, a really, really nice person, because there's this really deep, dark demon inside that I'm trying to hide. So I overwork and I overspend and I overplease, all just thinking that it's for others, but all just really trying to hide from my shadow. So you got to learn how to dance with that. And then the next step is to learn empathic communication with those younger parts that you've abandoned, and then learn how to have empathic communication with others. It blows my mind how we are just unaware of the fact that we're covert narcissists, and we just want everybody else to see us, and we label others, but we don't really see the reflection within ourselves. And then once we don't, then we're not able to really have others feel seen around us, and we expect somebody else to see us, and so that breaks the ability for us to create intimacy. And then the last part that we need in order to become trigger proof is community. You definitely need community and a guide and a commitment. You got to have somebody hold your feet to the fire, show you kind of like a reflection, go, hey, Danielle, did you just hear what you just said? Remember, that's your pattern. Can you see that? Are you going to allow that to continue, or are you actually choosing a new Danielle?
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. That's why your
No.
parents. That's why nobody wants to do it. Everyone wants somebody else to do it. So I
Mm-hmm.
really love seeing people who go, you know what, it didn't start with me, but it can
Mm-hmm.
end with me.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and it's empowering, and I think that's really important, from going from the victim to taking charge of your own life. One of the steps is releasing those resentments. And when you were talking earlier about living in your parents' home, you talked about releasing that expectation of them. Can you talk a little bit, or those go hand in hand, I assume, the resentment and releasing. Can you talk a little bit about how to do that? Because that is not easy.
No, that's why we have big interviews for our events and our masterminds and all that stuff. It's like, do you realize that you taking on this responsibility will probably be very difficult to do? However, the rewards are amazing,
Mhm.
because you get to create the life the way you want, rather than having. Um, I just remember this feeling of like growing up, that experience where there you are you are you're having the experience where you are an extension of your parents' ego. So you have to do this, you have to, achieve a certain thing, you got to be this, you got to be a doctor, you got to be this, and it's all for all the right reasons. I'm not going to challenge the reasons. Every parent wants their child to have safety, security. right? The way they know, it. Uh, Unknowingly, when a child grows up, we have to choose between authenticity and attachment. Do I choose my own way and then risk having rejection from my caregivers? Or do I just say okay and placate and just be and do whatever I think my parents would want so that I get affirmation and approval? And this was a big war with me, right? I have a twin brother who always went, you know, approval, approval, approval. I'm kind of like the black sheep where I didn't want to do the traditional route. I didn't want to be in the religion. I didn't want to. So there's a black sheep component to it where deep down inside there's a desire for your authentic expression, and a realization that that authentic expression is not going to win the approval of your parents. So there was this war inside of me consistently, and I would always have the experience where my parents would say, "We don't understand you. Like, why? Like, this is not how you were raised. Like, why? Like, why are you choosing this path? Why? Like, why are you dating this person, choosing this path?" It was because I wanted to. I didn't want to be raised, with certain set of criteria. So um, for me, it was the realization when I really finally let go of the expectation that my parents will understand me,
Mm.
that they should really get. And I just realized, even going into chiropractic, even leaving chiropractic, when I was met with so much resistance, I was going to work each day saying, I'm going to show them, I'm going to prove it to them. And that wasn't even at a conscious level, but I was going constantly to try to prove to them that my choices are valid, which got me far. But there's an inauthenticity to it. There's an empty and hollowness to it. And no matter what I would achieve, nothing was ever enough. And so my healing was the realization that that was running in the background all the time, and that I was not able to have healthy relationships unless I cleaned that up, unless I called that out, unless I took responsibility for that, and then said, look, instead of looking for that approval from them, just dedicate yourself to finding that approval inside of you, and know that they won't likely agree. And cognitively, I understood how important what that was, but in practice, it was different. In practice, I was hiding my truth. I was dating this person they didn't approve of. So I would just have a long relationship, like 2, 3 years, and I would just keep her as, hidden because they wouldn't approve of her. Right. So I
Wow.
didn't have an authenticity with my parents. So when I moved back in with them, it was like, you know what? I'm going to I'm going to take everything that I know that they're not going to be approving of, and I'm just going to throw it out on the table, and I'm going to be like, this is me. And I'm just going to sit in and stew in the discomfort of your disappointment, and I'm going to love the shit out of myself regardless. And
And
it
how
took
did
a
that
while.
go when you
It
did?
took a
Did you?
while.
Yeah.
It took a while, but a year later, it was so great. 1 year later, after I started that process, um, I was speaking. I was invited to speak in a chiropractic convention in France to a group of European chiropractors, 200 of them. And I was speaking. I was speaking and opening for my mentor, Dr. John DeMartini, who I've been a student of his for so many years. 5 years ago, I was like, I want to share the stage with you one day. And that time in Paris in June of 2019, I had a chance to do that. My parents came they flew to Europe, and they were present in it. And I got to show them a video of them that I did 5 years prior, where I told them about my desire to leave chiropractic and go full time into teaching because I found the source of intergenerational trauma is the problem. And they were so dead against it. And I have them, my dad saying on video, look, it's your life, but I hope you prove me wrong. I hope that in 4 or 5 years' time that I'm in one of your sold out events, and you turn around and you point me in the audience and you say, you're wrong. It's because of you that I'm here. And so 4 years later, I played him that video. I played that video to the whole event.
Oh my gosh. That's what I was
And
wondering.
everybody stood up, standing ovation, tears in my eyes, and my relationship with my parents has been amazing ever since. I met somebody amazing who I didn't feel like their approval of her mattered. It was just who I like. Before it was like, is she okay? And now it was like, you know what? I don't care. And
Mhm.
I reflect on it and I'm like, it's sad that in my 40s I was still like that. But this is a pandemic, especially in cultural, like Persian, Greek, Asian cultures. People, I see so many depressed people in their middle ages still living still not having transcended mommy and daddy's approval. And
Mhm.
once I did, and I didn't care. They are such a important part of my son's life. They come and they cook for us, and they just absolutely are like, I've never been closer with them than I am now because of releasing the expectation of them to understand and just taking on and healing my own attachment wounds.
Mhm. And you're authentically you now. That's incredible.
True.
There's so much I want to talk about, but I am going to I got to wrap up. So I'm just going to do the last
Sure.
just two more questions. One is for people listening, if there was one thing for them to do today to start reducing the stress that they are feeling on a daily basis, what would you have that be? Just to get
Well,
started.
master your breath. I have an event that people message me all the time and they say, your story is resonating. Where do I begin? And I tell people very easily, you begin with the breath. Um, the experience of inhale and exhale, it's like a 1-to-1. It's like the way that you breathe. I want you to look at it as the way that you breathe is the way that you live. If I like my relationship with the universe is dictated by my breath. Inhale is receiving, exhale is giving. In a healthy experience of life, you have a balance of give and receive, right? But we don't have that healthy balance because of those unresolved traumas, and it shows up in our breath. So if you ever catch yourself, Danielle, like taking shallow breaths in, that is an that is an inability to receive,
Mm,
an unworthiness of receiving. If you ever feel like you're like you're forcing the exhale, it's kind of forcing. It's like control, right? So the practice of just observing and then practicing a conscious connected breath is the foundation of your entire transformation,
mhm,
because it is the link between your unconscious and conscious mind. It sounds simple, but it's free. And what I do is I teach it in my workshop. It's called Breathwork and Badassery. So what I do is I take people through the foundations of nervous system into like understanding your nervous system. This is where do we begin? This is where you begin.
mhm,
You fundamentally understand how your nervous system works. There's so much information out there, taking classes, courses, YouTube videos, books on like foundations of nervous system regulation, like how the nervous system works from a body-based approach, which ultimately, if any teacher is worth their salt, they will be talking about breath.
mhm,
And so that's where I begin, and learning how to connect with the younger parts of you that you abandoned during those times where you had really difficult things happen to you.
mhm,
You have abandoned you adapted by abandoning yourself. So we must learn. It's not even an option. Learning how to connect with that inner child, that inner victim, that inner saboteur inside of you that became what they became because of trauma. If you don't rescue those parts, if you don't reconnect with the breath, what happens is you will unconsciously seek things outside, and you'll be chasing, spinning your wheels and running from your shadow. And we've all had that experience. But when you wait too long, your health suffers. So it all goes back to the ancient practice of am I connected to my breath? Am I connected to those younger parts of me that I abandoned, that I'm working so hard to avoid? You welcome them in. And so
Mhm.
learning those tools, fundamentals of nervous system regulation and self-regulation and internal co-regulation with the younger parts of you is where you begin.
Mhm.
And here's the best part. It's like martial arts. You'll always be learning. So you might as well
Yes.
learn tools. There's no finish line. Healing is a journey that continues, the truth continues to reveal itself. So it's really about learning how to change your relationship with life itself through
Mhm.
your nervous system.
Mhm. And I think too, as you get the tools, when new things come up, you're better equipped to handle them because you already have the tools. You've already been practicing. I was also
You're
thinking
trigger
of the
proof.
yes, love it. I love the name of that. The other thing is the stimuli and response for me with my children who are insane. Increasing that
How
space
old are
is
they?
is the breath.
How
Um,
old are they?
they are 8, 6, and 3.
Oh,
2.
wow.
8, 6, and 2. So
And that's
I got a lot.
and that is exactly what happens. Like they will like Dominic is 6 weeks old, and already when he has a meltdown, I can feel my body go
Mhm.
into fight or flight, and I can hear all sorts of stories. Am I doing this right? Am I good enough? Da 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 da. Which is all my own crap. That if I didn't have these tools, I would fucking take it out on him. What's the
Mhm.
matter with you? And he's just like 6 weeks old, and I can easily go there. And believe me, there's many times, especially if I haven't had sleep, if I didn't have these tools, I'm like, I really wanted to go there, and then
Mhm.
boom, pass that along to him.
Mhm.
And so it didn't start with me, but this is heroic work. And I'm
Mhm.
doing this for him. And here's the best part. You do it for your kids, and you get to do it for parents who never had access to learning these tools,
Yeah,
nor the
it's
inclination.
it's phenomenal. And I'm just so happy for you that your son is just 6 weeks old because you know this now. And for me, I feel like when I look back at early parenting, I was really parenting out of ego, really. Uh That's how I was parenting until I
Most
like
are, Danielle.
discovered this and moved into this probably when my oldest was 5ish. So,
Right.
it's been a journey and there's a little bit
I'll see him in my seminars in a few years.
no, no.
No problem.
I'm doing seminars in my house, okay? Things are getting corrected. I ask all my guests. I know we're a little bit over, but I do ask all my guests this, so I want to ask you the number one tip to a happier life. This podcast is about just finding that
Yeah.
happiness in the good, the bad, and the in between of
This
life.
is this might confront and trigger you, Danielle. The number one, uh, the key is to stop making happiness your goal, and let go of that one-sided fantasy and get really good at feeling like shit.
Mm. I feel totally fine.
Okay, good. Great. I mean, happiness is it's when we make that a goal. Let me read you a quote from one of my favorite authors about that, Viktor Frankl. I keep talking about
Yeah.
him. Um, Viktor Frankl. Here it is. So he says, "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue, and it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. Happiness must happen, and the same holds for success. You have to let it happen by not caring about it."
I love that. I think that's great advice.
Yeah.
I'm not changing the name of my podcast though.
No, no, I'm that that's all good. No, but it's just when I gave up seeking that, and I
Mhm.
just went for, like, what am I here? Like, I was going for my run.
Service.
I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm here to break the cycle of intergenerational trauma. And in the
Mhm.
process, I embrace happy, I embrace sad, I embrace all of it. I'm okay feeling crappy in the pursuit of something meaningful.
Mhm.
So
Greater
it's
than
all about
yourself.
it's all about
Mhm.
meaning rather
Mhm.
than a feeling.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I have loved talking to you. I will link all of your information so people can easily find you and start getting to work on this.
Thank you so much, Danielle. This was a great interview.
I absolutely love talking to Dr. Nima Rahmany. Everything he said, I just wanted to shout amen and, and clap my hands. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and I want to thank you so much for being here on Happiness and Progress.